Morena, good morning everybody. And probably like the rest of you, I'm feeling pretty lucky to be here and pretty lucky to be untouched by tragedy, untouched personally by tragedy. If anyone is feeling fragile or has had a close effect, my heart goes out to you. So welcome back to The Pick, again brought to you by these lovely people, especially these lovely people. God, they're good, they're amazing. Workshop 3, the minimum viable product, it's a product, revenue, income, and costs. You all know what costs are. So on our canvas, we're looking at core business, cost structure, revenue streams. What are the most important activities to create value? What are your biggest costs? And what do you make money from? And your folders, if you've chosen to take a folder, then we're sitting in the green space under product. Right, today we're going to start off with minimum viable product. We've got an exercise to help that gel. Our guest speaker is James Fuller. He's a co-founder of a company called Henry, which is a tech startup. He's been quite successful. They have been successful. They've raised money. They've launched to market. You might have seen them popping up on your Instagram feeds and things like that if you're that way inclined. He's going to talk about their journey through product, rip into revenue streams, cost structure. So today's focus. If you think back to week 1 when we asked what does success mean for you and what does good look like for your business, in week 2 we asked what's the purpose of your business and who's your customer. Today I want you to think about what's the easiest, fastest way to meet your customers' needs and how will I make and spend money. So the heart of that first question is meeting your customers' needs. We're talking about a version of your product or service which is fast and cheap to launch to market, but it still communicates your value proposition. If your value proposition is delicious, organic, ethical tea, then the minimum viable product still has to fulfill that promise. You can scale back the packaging of your tea, you can skip on the logo design, the number of different flavours of tea in your range, but it still needs to be delicious, eco-friendly, organic, and tea. And we're going to do an exercise to boil down what an MVP is for you. What are those essential components that need to be there, and what could you perhaps leave for later? Today we're going to add 3 fictional examples to help the concepts to gel. The examples I've chosen are a tech startup, a product startup, and a service startup. So Fred and Fran, they've got a tech startup. Juniper, she produces delicious, organic, eco-friendly tea. And Basil Brown's a life coach, and he wants to go out on his own. When you think about these 3, add a 4th one in your mind, and that's you. So when we're going through the examples, start thinking about what the example would be for your business. Reid Hoffman hosts a fantastic podcast called Masters of Scale, and that will be up on the resources page of the website. He's one of they call him the PayPal Mafia, one of the original founders of PayPal. He's quite left-wing. I think one of the other famous founders of PayPal is famously like he's walked out of the pages of Ayn Rand, very right-wing. But the podcast is fabulous, and he interviews different founders about about their journeys. And one of the things he says is, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. So last week we talked about your customer segments and your value proposition. Put another way, who is going to buy from you and why? This week we're going to start to talk about what they're going to buy. We also talked about testing your assumptions, going out and asking people what you think, going out and asking people who you think are going to be part of your customer base. MVP 101, minimum viable product 101. I'm not going to keep calling it minimum viable product. You guys, you know that is what that is now. The best way to test is with something that the customer can look and touch and feel. Everybody picks up information differently, so give them something that's as close to the finished product as possible. The best time to start testing is yesterday. And the sooner you get a version of your product or service in front of your customer, the closer you are to making money. This is another quote by a famous dude. You probably heard of it. Definitely would have heard of him. Done is better than perfect. I'm a big believer of this, and that doesn't mean that I have low standards. I have very high standards. But you got to GSD, you got to get stuff. And there's another S word that I usually put in there. Done. And that's the basis of the MVP. Done is better than perfect, so long as it still fulfills your value proposition. The MVP is a decision to not do everything you dream of straight away. It's simplifying your dream into something that you can do now. We saw this slide in workshop 1. The most important word in this is viable. Well, they're actually both important. Minimum and viable. It's got to be good enough to attract the first users. Obviously, you're trying to get to here. One of the most important things to bear in mind is you might be wrong about this, about what perfect is. So this enables you to look into it and really test your own assumptions. So we build our minimum viable product. We measure it by testing and analysing it. We learn from the testing and the analysing. And then we do it again and again and again. And you're better to do 3. You'll learn far more doing 3 of those than spending all your time mad scientisting in your garage producing something that you think is perfect. This is going to take you far further, far faster. This slide has got a lot of words in it, and that's because after last week, a lot of you asked for the presentation. And I wanted to put something with chunky information into the presentation. Again, what's the easiest and fastest way? But also, what's essential to solving your customer's problem and what isn't essential? How can you start small while still fulfilling the promise of your value proposition? What's the quickest way to a sale? That's something we forget about, right? Because we're thinking, oh, I can't sell yet, I can't sell yet, I can't sell yet. Get out there, get selling. You might be able to get there a heck of a lot faster than you think. What are the risks of starting this way, of starting with the minimum? And how can you offset them? How can you mitigate them? Who do I know who will be a guinea pig? Now, these should not be your friends and family. Your friends and family love you. They do not want you to go into this difficult business for yourself, working for yourself process. They want you to get a nice job where you get holiday pay and sick pay and you're looked after and you've got colleagues and there's a cup of tea. But friends are friends. Friends of friends are cool. Someone who will represent the type of customer you're trying to reach, and someone who would try new things and have a bit of an open mind approach. If you think of a Tupperware party where you get someone you know to invite a bunch of their mates round, that's quite a good model. You already got a bit of a warm room and somebody's already supportive of you, so it's not quite as freaky, but you are reaching new people. Test all the things. Test your assumptions, test yourself, test your product. Learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. The top 5 reasons why I'm thrashing this point about the minimum viable product. 1, you might be able to sell it faster than you think. Until you try it, you don't know. Sure, you might have to give away your minimum viable product at first, but you might be able to start selling it, even if it's just to cover costs. It's the fastest and cheapest way to start testing. The more you test, the better you are, because the more you're learning about your customer and your product. This is a big one. It's a cheap marketing campaign. The people you test it on are going to become your customer base. Some of those people, when you launch to market, they're going to be raving about your product. They'll be sharing you on Facebook and social media, whatever channels are fashionable when you launch. It's a fabulous way to start building your sales pipeline and building your brand. And your idea of perfect might be wrong. It's best to find out before you spend the money. Starting small with an MVP allows you to start getting runs on the board now, and that's empowering. And it puts this guy, your customer, at the heart of the process. We're going to rip into some examples to help solidify the exercise that's coming up. So, Fred and Fran founders, rather than building a working iPhone app, which can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, they decide to use PowerPoint, which they have on their own home computer, to create something which behaves almost exactly like the app. So they can show it to customers, start getting data now. They can update it for free and quickly using their own skills, and it uses existing resources. Perfect MVP. Example 2, Juniper's product is tea. Instead of launching a full range, she wants to do 12 different teas. Instead of doing that, she can start testing. She can do the Tupperware tea party type idea, where she finds out what a customer's actually going to like the most. She can sell at a market stall and mention that she's testing her product. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Innocent Smoothies, but when they launched their product, they took a caravan to a festival. They had one bin that said, "Don't quit your day job," one bin that said, "Go for it." They gave away samples all day. They said, "Our mums say we shouldn't quit our day jobs. We're asking you guys, what do you think? Do we have something?" And the photos of the bins are, full bin saying "Go for it," virtually empty bin saying "Don't quit your day job." So it's a nice way of testing. And also along the way, they honed their product range. And you can always add to it later when you've got a willing customer base who are going to help you launch. And you've got turnover from sales ideally, so it's not all just depleting your resources. And Basil's life coaching service. Before he gets an office, he's going to rent upstairs from the orchard. Before he invests in his marketing material and his program, he's going to use some free stuff online. As he goes, he's building word of mouth, honing his program, keeping his product range flexible, and his overheads low. It's exercise time. Cool, page 1 of the material, a few questions on there. And remember, done is better than perfect. You don't have to take ages and get just exactly the right thing, just chuck some ideas down based on what we've just talked about.
Okay, so my name is James Fuller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Henry. And and hopefully we're going to spend the next sort of 20 or 25 minutes just talking a little bit about kind of early stage product development, a little bit about minimum viable product, and sort of about the experience that we had when starting our business a little while ago, probably about 2 years ago now. So I don't have any kind of fancy slideshow or anything like that. I was just going to run through some really some more anecdotal kind of stories of our experience in coming to where we are today. So just for a little context, we started the original concept for Henry back in late 2016 or so. And effectively for us, it was, we'd kind of all gone out as contractors and freelancers and started to experience this pain of essentially having to be burdened with all of the tax and compliance and all of the hassle that comes with earning income independently. And it kind of occurred to us, I mean, I've got a technology background and my co-founders are kind of in process and finance. And we sort of looked at this and said, well, this is kind of madness. Effectively, contractors and freelancers and even people working in startups, for instance, are being treated as though they are running a small business. When you wouldn't say that an Uber driver is running a small business, or you wouldn't say that a midwife is running a small business. But these are all people who are effectively self-employed. And the kind of, the governments and the banks kind of punish these people by making them do their own taxes, making them do all this admin, which is hugely stressful. It causes a lot of anxiety, and it's largely unnecessary given that you can use some smart tech to automate quite a lot of the problem. So the whole idea behind Henry that takes all of the hassle out of tax and compliance. Effectively, we give them a bank account to get paid into, and whenever they get paid, we automatically calculate, deduct, and pay exactly the right amount of all of their taxes before passing what's theirs onto them. And it's worth noting that, you know, whilst we're talking about kind of early stage product development, the short spiel there about, you know, calculate, deduct, and pay and all of that, that probably took about a year and a half to come to that point of actually being able to describe this service in a way that people would resonate with. And I think that's sort of one of the things that I wanted to discuss today, is that constant refinement of not just what you think your product is, but what your customers think your product is, and what your customers want your product to be. And I think, you know, I wanted to reflect on the kind of, I suppose, the early stages of our product development, which, I mean, when we first started, we knew the pain firsthand ourselves. We've been contractors. We kind of knew that, you know, having to do taxes was, you know, a massive hassle, and it was expensive to get an accountant. And, you know, we kind of knew this pain firsthand. But in terms of identifying our target market, we essentially went out and said, well, you know, before we did anything, before we built anything, the first thing that we did was we said, well, what is this market? Who do we think would use a product that would allow the sort of tax and compliance to be automated? And at the time, we just assumed that it would all be people like us. We were, you know, incredibly, I suppose, naive to a certain extent. And we said, well, actually, you know, the majority of people who will use this service will be contractors. You know, they'll be business analysts or project managers. They'll be the kind of people that we were and the kind of people we saw every day, which is a great start. It was a really good hypothesis. And you know, what we obviously learned over time is that the market is a lot bigger. But the one thing that we did do, that we really started with, was a very firm hypothesis, with that being that we hypothesized that people who are like us in kind of white collar contracting jobs, who were self-employed, were effectively burdened by this sort of admin and tax and compliance, and effectively that a solution could be built that would automate a lot of that pain. So essentially, it's sort of, the first thing that we ever did was to test out a kind of really basic minimum viable product. And when I say basic, I mean, we spent maybe a week or two building a very stripped back WordPress website, all for free, all doing this ourselves. We didn't pay anyone to create a website for us. We literally created like a template website that explained what the service was. And it had a couple of forms where you could enter in some details about yourself and what you did and you know, what kind of work you did. And then everything else was literally just handled manually. We had some Excel spreadsheets that we were running, which did, you know, calculations using some basic formulas. But what we started with was the most minimum viable product you can possibly think of. We didn't have an app. We didn't start with an app. We didn't start with, you know, a Flash website. It was effectively a landing page that you could log into. And so what we did is we took probably, I think it was about $50 at the time, and we set up a Twitter account, and we ran some Twitter ads and we ran some Facebook ads for about $20 or $30 a time, just trying to see if we could direct some traffic to this website, to see if anyone would click through, if anyone would actually sign up. And you know, that was the kind of the most fundamental part of where we started, was just getting out there and running some really basic social media campaigns, just to almost test whether or not we were articulating the problem and the solution in the right way. Because you can be quite comfortable if you have this hypothesis that, you know, other people must have this problem as well, and you direct 1,000 people at your website and only one of them signs up, then that will tell you quite clearly that either no one has this problem or you're not articulating your solution correctly. So everything for us was about saying, what's the quickest way we can get out there and validate this hypothesis that we've got? And you know, in this day and age, it's really easy. It takes no time at all to set up a really basic Twitter ad campaign, target it at a group of people who you think are going to be target customers, and run those tests. I think the learning from very early on is that you need to be measuring everything. At those early product stages, you need to be measuring, hey, we chucked $20 at a Twitter campaign. How many people visited the website? How many people signed up? And start thinking about that kind of return on investment and customer acquisition cost really from that early stage, because that benchmark is then what you're going to refine over time as you start to change the website, as you start to learn a bit more about what your customers want. You're effectively shooting for the lowest customer acquisition cost you can possibly get to. And I think back in those days, I think we were at the point where we had sort of a $100 ad campaign would get us one customer. And I think at the time we were kind of, I suppose, but knocked off our chairs when some random up in Auckland logged into our website and gave us all of their personal information. So I think that it was a big turning point for us. Was they responded to a Twitter ad, they went to our terrible WordPress website, which just looked like a heap of crap. It was awful. It was so bad. It was clickbaity as anything, and it had too many words on it. But they signed up. They entered in their IRD number, their GST number, they put in their bank account details. They literally gave us all of their information. And it was at that point that it actually occurred to us that this could actually be, what we thought it was. It could actually be this amazing product, in that if someone was willing to trust a terrible website, was willing to kind of throw caution to the wind to solve this pain that they were having, then clearly this was a problem worth solving. So the real early stages of our product was all about essentially putting out something that was really basic, and everything behind the scenes was just done manually. There was no need to kind of build any automation or build any of the complex tax rules or even build any kind of payments engine, because in the short term we could use human glue to basically fill in the gaps, whilst we worked out whether or not this was actually something worth pursuing. Because there'd be nothing worse than spending like 3 months polishing an MVP and putting it out there, and then realizing that it needed to be changed. So I think there's a really great quote from Reid Hoffman, who says, if you're not embarrassed by your MVP, you're doing it wrong. And I think when we look back on our MVP now, it just looked terrible. It was horrendous. And we were truly embarrassed by it then, and we're still embarrassed by it now. But it was a really useful thing for us to get something out in market and do some testing effectively. So the early stage, that was all for us, was about running a closed beta. And we sort of scaled up to, 15, 20 customers, and effectively ran them through, we didn't tell them it was a beta trial, but it was what we were doing to validate our proposition. We were kind of rapidly iterating on the core features of the product, not by providing complex automation, but by just telling people we had these features that we were doing manually in the background. So we were kind of presenting almost like that duck swimming on the water. We were presenting this like smooth sailing duck, where under the water the legs were going furiously, and we were manually processing things and kind of feeling our way as we went. It seemed tempting to try and have a kind of massive open trial and try and bring in, hundreds of customers and go and throw $1,000 behind a Facebook campaign to go and acquire people. But, what we decided at the time was we just don't know enough. We don't know enough about who might sign up. We can't risk essentially bringing on too many customers really early on with no funding and just having a service that flops. We were using our beta trial as a learning experience to make sure that what we were building was going to be fit for purpose, as opposed to, getting overrun with hundreds of people who all had different requirements. So, that allowed us to, as we were, processing things manually, and as we were kind of learning what our customers wanted, that kind of allowed us to identify where the real pain was in our own internal processes. So what was the main cost to serve? What was the thing that was taking us the most time in terms of this support? And using that to drive what we decided to actually create from a technical perspective. So, we knew that payments processing, for instance, started to take longer and longer the more customers we had. So we said, well, we need to employ smarter tech to do payments processing. And that's kind of the same principle that we've been using for the last couple of years, has been almost operating at this rev limiter that you scale up and you get a whole bunch of customers come on board, and then you hit the limit of what you can actually manage with manual processes. So as you approach that limit, you automate a whole bunch of stuff, which allows you to shift gears and bring on more customers. But we still have stuff today that we're doing manually because it doesn't make sense to sort of automate or to spend a whole lot of time building it, because of the fact that it's not enough of a pain for us internally yet. If it costs you $2 a week to do something manually, but it would cost you, 50 grand to build some automated thing, just do it manually. Just use that human glue and, iterate over time, only developing on those things that not only will give value to your customers, but will actually drive significant value for you internally. So sort of as we're developing out the kind of early stage products, over probably the first year or so, we almost had these check-in points of asking ourselves, is this a thing? So very early on, we thought, will anyone else want this? And we did some Twitter campaigns and we said, is this a thing? And people came and signed up. And once we had sort of 20 or 30 people on as paying customers, we still would ask ourselves, like, is this still a thing? Like, is this still something that's going to be larger and larger? And I think having that in the back of your mind as you're doing early stage product testing is really important, because for a lot of ideas and a lot of products, it is not a thing. It might be a thing for you personally, it might be a good idea, but is it something that people out in the real world care enough about to pay for, and not just pay for once, but pay for consistently? And that's always the hardest thing to admit. And we always kind of look at what are the lessons that we learned from this experience ourselves. And even as we were building, we learned that we were building things that we wanted to build, as opposed to things that our customers wanted. And maybe we were talking about the service in this way that made sense to us, but didn't make sense to our customers. So we kind of, one of the things that's always really useful to do is to be really frank and honest with yourself as to whether or not you're doing things because your customers want them or your market is demanding it, or whether it's just because you think it's a good idea. And that's where constant engagement with customers, running trials, iterating slowly, waiting till you're about to hit that manual rev limiter before building anything allows you to have far more control over what it is that you end up putting out there into the market. I think key lessons for us around this early stage was literally, if we were to do this again, I think we would follow a similar approach, but we would probably build less. We got to a point where we almost got a bit comfortable and a bit cocky with what we knew, and we said, oh, we'll go and build some automation. And we built a whole bunch of stuff into our platform that we kind of had to unwind about 6 months later, because our market just suddenly exploded. From early on, it was just contractors, to suddenly we had everyone from taxi drivers to tattoo artists to barbers. We didn't even realize in the early stages that there was probably about 500,000 self-employed people just in New Zealand. And we built this kind of platform that was great for a small subset of them. So being able to kind of be a bit more cautious about when we started to build was probably a big lesson for us. And, as I say, sort of having to unwind some of that stuff 6 months in was a real learning point for us, to say, well, actually, if we'd have thought ahead earlier and we'd done more research rather than jumping straight into build, we probably wouldn't have, been carrying a bit of that technical debt with us. And then I think the final big lesson, alongside kind of always listening to your customers, is, we put out our service as being all about simplifying self-employment for people. And then we looked at our website and we said, well, we say we're simplifying things, but we've done the opposite. We've got a website that is overly complex. And we went for that classic startup mistake of having 3 pricing plans. So we had like the 1% plan, the 1.75, and then like a 4% plan. And the 1.75 was like the most popular. And, we did that like stupid thing where you just kind of fall into a pattern of what everyone else is doing in terms of their pricing models. And, it really made us think that we'd taken this idea of making things simple and we'd overcomplicated it, because we tried to make it more complex. We tried to talk to our customers about it being fancy automation, and we had a .io domain name to try and seem more like a tech company. And the big learning for us was that none of our customers wanted that. Our customers actually don't care that it's automated. They don't care that we've got a whole bunch of smart tech. What they actually want is the peace of mind. So that allowed us to flip our brand once we realized that to say, well, actually, our product is more about a lifestyle choice than it is about adopting a technology solution. And I think it was only through engagement with customers and kind of gradually iterating on that we got ourselves to a position where we understood that it was less about what we thought the product was, and it was more about what our customers thought it was and what they wanted it to be.
So your revenue streams, it represents the cash, not the profit. It's the different ways that money comes into your business. Here are some examples of types. Doesn't mean that there's not a type that's not up there. This, speak up if you can think of something in your business that's not on that list. So direct sale, goods or services. Usage fees, so that goes up the more you use something. Subscription fees, some money that comes in a regular period like Netflix. Renting or leasing. Licensing, that's a classic software thing. Brokerage or referral fees. Advertising fees. And I like to think of your revenue streams as the different baskets for your eggs. We're always told not to put all our eggs in one basket. Each revenue stream is a different basket. Going back to thinking about what is your core business, what are you selling? So it can be called your unit of sale, your typical offering. What is it that you are selling? What new revenue streams have you perhaps not thought about? Can you pop some advertising on your website? Have you got a customer base who appeals to somebody? If your customer base is small businesses, would Henry perhaps pay you to advertise on your website? Things like that. Is there anything you haven't thought of? So there's an exercise in your worksheet, the next one. Just going through and ticking which of these apply to you. So I've just had an expert point out that we should be very cautious before we allow other people to advertise on our websites, because it can slow them down considerably. And the income will be very small. So when we talk about advertising, don't expect to make advertising from your websites. Another bit of advice there about ways to make money from your website that is not advertising is endorsement. So through blogging, social media, I guess that's the influencer generation, coming through there. So I've got an example here for Juniper's teas. Juniper has identified 3 revenue streams and 3 customer segments. First revenue stream is boxed tea. The second is bulk tea refills. And the third is online sales. She's a product business. So as Cindy's pointed out, each one of these is a product under direct sale, but she's categorized them down into different products. So boxed tea. This customer segment wants delicious organic teas with posh branding on their shelves. This revenue stream helps tea shops to differentiate themselves from high volume retailers like supermarkets. Her bulk tea for high-end cafes. This customer wants delicious tea, which customers who want ethical, delicious organic tea will buy, but something that is a lower price so they can make a higher margin. So Juniper eliminates the packaging and sells in bulk packs with a jar that the cafe can refill, and that reduces the price per cup. Online sales for digital native home users. That's her customer segment. They want to purchase this kind of tea easily, and they also want to have a better relationship with the brands that they buy. So Juniper can build some social media and other digital processes into that. So quick fill in the blanks. This is not in your book. This is in your brain. My business has how many revenue streams? So going back to looking at how these examples apply to you. Now, at the bottom of that page, I want to bring you back to basics. What are you selling? So if you can just list, what are you selling at the bottom of that page? So in the early stages of a business, we split our costs into 2 types. startups, which you only pay once to get your doors open, and ongoing, which is the cost of doing business. We've got a mix of people in this room and watching at home. Some of you are startups in the true sense of the word. Some of you are established businesses with just ongoing costs. Bootstrapping, getting oneself into or out of a situation using existing resources. To pull yourself up by your bootstraps is to get where you're going under your own steam. For example, to start a business without spending much money. So what are the cheaper alternatives? If you have a look at the costs page, of your exercise, even though we're talking about startup costs and ongoing costs, there's a bootstrap version for each of them. So when you're starting up, your materials, you can reduce that expense by just ordering the minimum. I know it's tempting to go for bulk discounts, economy of scale, but you just spend your minimum. Packaging, what can you do by hand? What can you print off at home? Space, hire a room, the orchard, your garage, your bedroom, your kitchen table. Advice. Now this is a big one, because most lawyers and accountants I've spoken to, if you ring them up and say to the receptionist, look, I'm starting a business, or I've got an issue, I'm not sure what to do, could I have 20 minutes, half an hour of someone's time for free? I would expect that they will say yes. Certainly the big law firms in this town do, the big accountancy firms in this town do. You just got to ask. The government, ask the government, not just us, because we're not technically the government, we are government funded, but we're set up by the government to give free advice. But also the Inland Revenue has a hotline. The Inland Revenue sends people to the orchard once a month or something similar, and you can stop in and talk to them. You don't need to pay an expensive accountant. They've got the information too. Business.gov.nz, that's got heaps of stuff. You have to fish around a little bit. I think sometimes the names on the menus of their websites are a little bit counterintuitive. But boy, are there some good templates, and we're going into some of them later in the workshop, later in the program, not today. Also, ask someone who has their act together. Someone who's done it before you. Most of us want to help. Most of us are good people and will want to help. And anyone who doesn't can rack off, move on. Marketing assets, these can be so expensive, and until we've got enough money to pay a professional, there are lots of ways that we can bootstrap this, and this is probably the key way that you can keep your startup costs low while you work out who your customer is, what your business model is, and all that sort of stuff. So James from Henry, he talked about a one-page WordPress site with a login. Another one is Weebly. There's hundreds of them. Wix, Squarespace. What was that? Kiwi Page Builder. Representatives in the room right now. So yeah, there's lots of stuff online automating this stuff. That doesn't mean that once you've got money, it's still a lot of value in paying professionals to really make it kick. But when you're getting started, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Freemium graphic design. Things like canva.com. You can go online, it'll have a little ad it'll say canva.com or something on the graphic that you create. But you can create awesome stuff for free. Infographics, all sorts of things to help you get started for nothing. So that recommendation was the marketplace on Facebook. Advertising for a graphic designer saved $120 an hour. Amazing. Yeah, I remember when I worked in a big advertising agency, the fees were humongous. And then there's low cost like graphicriver.net. If you're getting business cards printed, consider doing your first run from Vistaprint or something else. Now, I don't vouch for these businesses' ethics. I don't know if they pay tax in New Zealand. I'm just, these are ways that you can get stuff for free. So maybe we can afford to be a bit more ethical later, maybe we can't. Maybe ethics are something you can't compromise on, and that's up to you. Vistaprint, jump online, I think $20, you get a bunch of business cards, they've got logo templates there, you can kind of create your logos. Obviously you're not getting the most beautiful, awesome stuff in the world, but it'll get you through and it gets you off the ground now. So, what will it take? It takes money, time, people, and supplies. You need marketing assets. They need to be consistent. They need to look good. They can be the minimum viable product, but remember that the minimum viable product still has to fulfill your promise, and if your promise has to communicate that you know what you're doing. You need a space. You need some kind of product, material, supplies. You need a cup of tea. You need to register your company, but you can do that yourself. I think I'm going to be showing the amount of time it's been since I registered a company, but it was something like $120 maybe 10 years ago. And you just do it online through the company's office. Yes, you can ask a lawyer to do it, or a legal exec to do it, or an accountant. You can also do it yourself. Ongoing costs. So there is an exercise in there. It's not an exercise that you need to complete here, because what I want you to do is actually put values beside your costs. This is going to come in handy later. It's going to be really useful when we start to talk about pricing, when we look at some of those templates I talked about on business.gov.nz, where they allow you to play with your pricing and your profitability and your margin, and they're brilliant. But first you need to know what your costs are, and please, the figures that you put in there, the quality of the data is going to impact the quality of the value that you get out of the course later on when we start drilling down into this stuff. Examples of ongoing costs. Salary. You have to keep yourself alive, energized. You have to look after yourself. It's the first thing that people usually skip. But you are your business. So, until if you're going to sell it, until it's something that you can sell to somebody else, you have got to look after your primary asset, and that is you. So the Inland Revenue and business.gov.nz, they both have formulas, especially the Inland Revenue. They have formulas for how you can work out what percentage, if you have a home office, what you can claim. For the video recording, that was advice to ring the Inland Revenue and ask for a Getting Started in Business book, which apparently has heaps of good advice and covers all of this. Workshop 3 material is due on Tuesday. That's the stuff that you've got here. Submit it in the same way as you did before. For extra resources, our digital team of one will have put quite a bit of stuff up on at that URL, but they won't put the YouTube link to watch the recorded session, because that's a secret, it's a private link. And we do ask that you don't share it. This is a globally used formula. You will be picking up by now that all of the people, the speakers, are talking about the same stuff that's tried and tested. James was talking, he misquoted, but he even used the same quote as I did, so Google it. If you're struggling with something, or you're really interested in something, you want to go down a rabbit hole and learn heaps more, Google it. There's heaps out there. Up and coming events that I would really, really, really recommend you go to. This one, it's a lunchbox session with Libby Evans from Thrive Marketing. Libby has a startup herself called Tankful. Well, she and her husband do. It's a water tank meter. It sits in your water tank if you're on roof water, and it talks to your smartphone or your tablet or whatever, and it tells you what your levels are, what your usage is, heaps of other cool stuff. So she's a businesswoman herself. She's been through this process. She works with a lot of business people. It's half an hour, it's free. She's going to talk about telling your story, communicating your customers and honing your story. Keep an eye on the Orchard website for the events page. Like us on Facebook if you like, but keep an eye on the events page, because the team work really hard to try and attract people who are going to be useful. And these aren't sales pitches. They're somebody coming in and giving half an hour of their time to try and say what they think is most important that you need to know about their work. Also, they're all recorded by the lovely dudes at Channel North, dudes and dudettes. And they're on the Facebook page, the Orchard Facebook page. You can just see them under video, scroll through, have a look. They're brilliant. 16th of May, we talked in the first workshop about a Better by Lean course run by Callaghan Innovation. I've done it, I thought it was brilliant. It's an introduction to the lean methodology, lean business methodology. Especially if you've got an established business, it's your first, there's funding for you to get a consultant later to come into your business and apply the methodology to your business. You have to start with this, and then later on you can talk to Callaghan and they can fund you into some really awesome stuff. And then of course, I'm going to say come to my workshop, it's highly recommended, but there's another Callaghan Innovation one. We've got Ross Pearce coming in, and he's going to do a 10 types of innovation. It's normally a 4-hour course. He's doing a capsule for us. This one, I think you pay something like $65. This one you pay something similar normally, but it's free. It's funded for the pick. I haven't done this course, but it's supposed to be fantastic. Apparently most people, we might do 1 or 2, or maybe 3 types of innovation in our business. There's a whole lot more. And the top companies, I think, run sort of 5 or 6, have 5 or 6 innovative practices going through. So I think that's really important for Northland to be bringing that in, which is cool.